Welcome to all of you either online or in the room with us here. It's my great pleasure to introduce my longtime friend, colleague, and now our colleague of the African Studies Center for this year's Fulbright Scholar, Dr. Masresha Fetene. Many of you know he's had many different iterations in his life and his professional career, but ones that touch many different aspects of who he is and the contributions he's made. So some of the key issues here, many of you will know Dr. Masresha, but he is Professor Emeritus at Addis Ababa University. He's on the Board of Management of Bahardari University, both institutions of which we have direct affiliations and have had for many years, many productive engagements. Some of the things that Dr. Masresha brings to the table as he discusses with us his vision for African universities based on his experience, based on his idea of what is possible, what should be. He was also editor of the Addis Ababa University Press. And in that role, he not only fostered the publication of many scientific articles, publications, fascinating things on birds and on aquatic life, but also humanities. He introduced plays and different kinds of literature that were new to the press when he was there, and he introduced them to a wider public audience. It's a fantastic contribution. He's with us this year as not only the former executive director of the Ethiopian Academy of Sciences, any of you who have been at Addis Ababa to visit that place that he established. It's the old foreign minister's residence that is a fantastic garden space, meeting space for the Ethiopian Academy of Sciences. So Professor Masresha will offer us a vision, a plan for how African universities, the transformational agenda of an African university, path to a
research university.
It's hidden by the
yeah, you'll just need to you'll hit that blue button there. Got it.
So, old friend, Dr. Masresha, welcome.
Thank you, Jim, for this generous introduction. And thank you for those of you who have come to listen to me. And also I would like to thank my friends who have joined me from Ethiopia and elsewhere. Thank you for being here. Now, the topic of my presentation today is Transformational Agenda of an African University.
I think you just need to hit. Oh, we went back to double screen here. Yeah. Ooh. There we go. Okay, you should be able to move. No?
Or
You use the arrows, maybe?
Yeah, try the arrow key. Nope. There we go. Try it again. There we go.
okay.
Sorry, the setting changed.
Okay, I'm sorry for this. Universities represent any nation's intellectual capital, as you all know, and creation of a knowledge society through transformation and investment in universities is every nation's desire. Universities all over Africa, from Addis Ababa University to University of Ghana, Legon, or the University of Al-Qarawini in Morocco. Universities in Africa are working to transform themselves into relevant knowledge producing and disseminating institutions. But what are universities? Universities are institutions dedicated to the quest and dissemination of knowledge. This mission of universities was around for a long time, but beginning the early 19th century, creation of new knowledge has been added into the major mission of universities. This is as a result of the establishment of Humboldt University or Berlin University in Germany by Wilhelm von Humboldt. Wilhelm von Humboldt was the Minister of Education for the Peruvian government, and he was inspired by his brother Alexander von Humboldt, who was a very well-known, well-renowned researcher on research. So he introduced knowledge creation research into the university system. So we say that research universities were first established in Germany at the Humboldt University. And this was also shown because until the Second World War, most of the Nobel Prizes were won by the Humboldt University in Berlin, because that university concentrated on research and continued to do research. What you see here is Alexander von Humboldt with his instruments in his worldwide research. Now, today, universities are the scholarly and ethical authorities that lead the stride of nations towards economic growth and social progress. So the sole purpose of universities, wherever it may be, is national economic growth and human character development. Now, I'm going to talk about Ethiopian universities. So I will begin with a brief history of higher education in Ethiopia. The 1950s saw the establishment of several colleges in Ethiopia. The first was the University College of Addis Ababa, which was established in 1950. The College of Agriculture in Alemaya, established in 1951 through the assistance and support of the Oklahoma State University. The Imperial College of Engineering in 1953. The Public Health College in Gondar in 1954. And Building College in Addis Ababa in 1954. Building College was established as an Ethio-Swedish collaboration. Universities, these various colleges were brought together, were merged to form Haile Selassie First University in 1961. And as you may know, Haile Selassie, Emperor Haile Selassie gave his palace to be the seat of the university administration and some of its faculties. Haile Selassie First University was renamed Addis Ababa University in 1974 following the regime change. And between 1974 and 1991, this is the Derg period, Ethiopia had two universities, Addis Ababa University and Haramaya University, which was upgraded from the College of Agriculture in Alemaya. And today, the country has close to 50 public universities and several private universities, which are found dispersed in different corners of the country. Now, the call for differentiation. For 2 decades, these universities have been following the same program. One could say they were clones of Addis Ababa University, only different in size. They had identical mission, visions, and governance structure, student admission policies, activities, and program offerings, even research engagement. Now, in 2015, the Ethiopian Academy of Sciences conducted its second science congress, which was on re-envisioning higher education and research in Ethiopia. And during this congress, it was strongly recommended that Ethiopian universities be differentiated and that Ethiopia should establish research universities. Soon, the fifth education sector development plan was also produced for the period 2015 and 2020, and it also included differentiation of universities, and it indicated that Ethiopia needs to establish 3 research universities. And more recently, in 2019, the Ethiopian education roadmap, which was widely discussed, brought the issue of differentiation once again. and it recommended that the universities should be differentiated into research universities, applied science universities, science and technology universities, and comprehensive universities. Now, as a result of this, 8 universities are envisaged to become research universities, including Addis Ababa University and Bahar Dar University. So research universities are to come from the transformation of the existing universities. But what distinguishes a research university? A research university is distinguished by the relative importance it places on the creation of new knowledge. It gives emphasis on research and graduate studies equally as for undergraduate studies. Its foundation is a superb undergraduate program. As you may know, the education model, there are different education models. The Oxford and Cambridge model, which brings a very strong undergraduate program. And there is the German research model, which is graduate and research university. The American universities have admirably combined the two. A superb undergraduate program with an excellent research and graduate program, and that's why research universities in America have succeeded so well. But the question is, how do you transform a young comprehensive university to a research university? What are the outstanding challenges of an emerging university, such as Bahar Dar University, Jimma University, and even Addis Ababa University? And what are the key areas of engagement for laying the foundations for a research university? But before that, we have to define what transformation is. Transformation is a multidimensional and sustained qualitative change. It has to be multidimensional, and it has to be thorough, and it has to include all components of a university. As you know, universities are multidimensional institutions. Clark Kerr, the 12th president of the University of California, and also the architect of the California Master Plan of Higher Education, he calls them not universities, but multiversities, that is, having different components. He actually compares them with cities, which have different components that one has to deal with. So one has to consider different components when transforming universities, and these take different elements. The transformation of university governance, institutional autonomy, and academic environment could be one component. There is this component contains governance, autonomy and dependence, administrative setup and governance structure, strategic vision, overall academic environment. These all come under the governance, institutional autonomy, and academic environment section, and one needs to transform also these components if one wants to transform a university. Not only this, one also needs to transform the student faculty research related aspects. Student selection and admission, how do you admit your students, how do you select your students? Faculty employment, how do you employ your faculty? What qualities do you look for in faculty, in subject matter proficiency? How do you make sure that faculty have the actual teaching language proficiency, or whether they have the language proficiency, the English language proficiency, for instance, in our case, and also research knowledge of faculty, whether they are trained in the conduct of research and also in grant writing, academic publication. So these are all aspects that need qualitative change if one wants to establish a transformed university. Also, transformation on curriculum and teaching related aspects needs to be also like attractive subject area combinations in curriculum, interdisciplinary curriculum, development of foundational literacies, computational skills and character qualities in the curriculum, also including indigenous knowledge. So transformation of the curricula is also a requirement that one has to take. Transformation of research-related issues like research funding and resources, research infrastructure, setup and utilization, research capacity building, research collaboration and partnership. All these aspects are important combinations. Now, transformation on leadership-related issues also, leadership characteristics and quality style, desired leadership features, shared leadership, and vision and strategies. So, a university has to be transformed in all these components. I have dealt with all these transformation aspects in my report. I'm going to report on all these, but today I'm only going to discuss a few selected areas for our purposes, selected key areas of engagement for the current discussion. I have selected these 5 aspects: university independence and autonomy, research and funding for investment in research, research setup and arrangements, relevant curricula, indigenous knowledge systems, and collaboration and partnership. These are the 5 areas that I have selected for us to discuss, although I will report on the other aspects as well in my final report. The question of university autonomy. There is a widely held understanding that the basic function of universities, that is the quest and dissemination of knowledge and creation of knowledge, cannot be fulfilled in the absence of university autonomy. In Ethiopia, universities get instructions and directions on matters big and small from the state or from the Minister of Education. The Minister of Education has only needs to make a phone call to stop something or to initiate something. So there is little independence in the various universities in this respect. The universities are micromanaged and lack discretion to take important decisions independently. But research universities, as we have said, actually all universities need institutional autonomy to function well. So, but let's define what autonomy is. University autonomy is the degree of freedom of the university to steer itself, that is, independence in formulating a strategy and in choosing the tools and approach for its function. But it has dimensions, different dimensions, and we'll discuss what these dimensions are. The dimensions of university autonomy. The dimensions of university autonomy include independence from external interference in respect to internal organization and governance, the freedom to decide about curriculum, academic programs, teaching methods, the internal distribution of financial resources, and the generation of income from non-public sources. Not actually being independent from financial support, but the freedom for internal distribution of financial sources. The selection of students and the recruitment of staff, the freedom to decide on issues related to quality assurance, and the freedom to decide on issues related to research and the freedom to publish. So these are all different dimensions of university autonomy that need to be respected. The second point I would like to discuss is resources and funding for investment in research. What are the major, but first it may be important to discuss the major challenges of research in an emerging university. Poor institutional research infrastructure, high cost of research equipment and high cost of maintenance, lack of systematic effort for research fund mobilization and poor fund management systems, and absence of systems for access and utilization of research facilities wherever they may be. These are emerging, major challenges of emerging university as far as research is concerned. Now, source of funding. The major source of funding and infrastructure for research in a developing country has to be necessarily the state. It's always the state. Even in the United States, the second most important transformation for research came as a result of the federal grants after the Second World War passed to support universities in this country. So every country deserves to have a few research universities. These African states need to invest on research universities. In return, universities need to align academic and research activities with the economic, social, and developmental issues of the state, and in particular, the region where they find themselves. And the federal, state, and the regions need to support the research infrastructure. The research infrastructure may be, there is a need to have also to work for the right arrangements for research infrastructure when they are. The EPRDF government had been relatively generous in buying research equipment. But you find most of these equipment not utilized because some of them have been ordered not correctly. Some of them do not know how to handle them. So there is a lot of equipment sitting idly in many universities, sadly. Zaudu Gabayo's work of 2012 has shown that many of these equipment and facilities are in a very sorry state, and that universities need to take some action. This tells us that it's not enough to have the research facilities, but one has to have the setup, the system, so that they are used efficiently. There is a need to minimize duplication, maximize utilization, and ensuring efficient maintenance. But how do you minimize duplication, maximize utilization, and ensure efficient maintenance? There are many suggestions for this. One system that I find to be good is the introduction of hierarchical research infrastructure and clustering setup. This was a suggestion given by a biotechnology study group led by Amara Gassesa, and they suggested that for infrastructure to be used very well and efficiently, one needs to have three laboratory setups: institutional laboratories, regional core laboratories, and national core laboratories. What do you have in an institutional laboratory? In an institutional laboratory, which you must find in every university for every discipline, you should have routine lab equipment that are needed every day. We can take two examples. The first one is biotechnology laboratory. In the biotechnology laboratory, one could have PCR machines, autoclaves, centrifuges, spectrophotometers that are needed every day for research. If you take a soil science laboratory, equipment for soil physical analysis, soil chemical analysis, so for organic matter analysis, for phosphorus and nitrogen measurements like gel and flame photometry, these are everyday equipment and facilities that you need in soil science. So every institution should work to have such equipment. But in regional core laboratories, you could have advanced equipment that are less frequently required and more sophisticatedly to be handled and maintained by trained technicians. Now, sorry, this is on automatic, and it goes before I. I don't know how this came about. Now, as I said, in regional core laboratories, that you could have established in the different regions. You could have equipment that are less frequently used, but that are maintained by technicians and more advanced than what you have in the institutional labs. For biotechnology regional core laboratories, for instance, you could have ultracentrifuges, real-time PCR machines, HPLCs, fluorescent microscopes, scintillation counters, and for instance, for soil science research laboratory, you could have elemental analysis, gas chromatography, CN analyzers, atomic absorption. These are one step higher, which you can find in a region. So every university could have the institutional laboratories, but then they could also have a regional laboratory. But the regional laboratory for biotechnology could be in one laboratory. The regional laboratory for soil science could be in another university. So bringing collaboration and partnership through the universities. And the third and the last one would be the national core laboratories. The national core laboratories would have state-of-the-art advanced equipment run by biomedical engineers. If you take the two examples, biotechnology, national core laboratory, and soil science national core laboratory, you would have very advanced equipment like DNA sequencers, next generation, electron microscopes, protein sequencers, etc. for biotechnology, and NMR machines, atomic absorption, X-ray chromatography for soil science laboratories. So the idea is you would have this sophisticated equipment at the national level for every major discipline, so that what cannot be done at the regional lab could be done at the national lab. And the national core lab need not necessarily be all in one place, but in different places also. This is an arrangement. You have a national core lab that will respond to different regional core labs dispersed throughout the country. Now, if you look at this, you can see that you would have different clusters. One cluster could be the cluster for northwest Ethiopia, where you have a set of a cluster of universities like Bahada University, University of Gondar, Waldia University, and Waldo University. So all these universities, as I said, did not have regional laboratories in one discipline, but in different disciplines, different universities could have. This brings a lot of collaboration and a lot of partnership and also efficient utilization of equipment. Now, what works for core laboratories can also work for ecological studies. I was fortunate to visit the Harvard forest with Jim, thanks to Jim. This is a forest that's found about 70 miles from here. It belongs to Harvard Forest, and it can be used as a model for multiple use and multiple levels of utilization. And the Harvard Forest, you have different universities. Harvard Forest itself, universities in Boston area like Boston University, and also other universities work there on short-term and long-term experiments. One also undertakes in the Harvard Forest very sophisticated experiments that have been going on for many years, with implications to the global climate study. So the Harvard Forest can be used as a model as a core lab concept for ecological studies. Not all universities can have ecological field research stations for teaching and research. So one could select such a forest and utilize it in such a way that many universities can work on short-term and long-term experiments with them. Yes. You can see here a young lady working on IRGA, infrared gas analyzer, analyzing soil respiration. and there are sophisticated also canopy studies going on, which I was fortunate to visit. So the Harvard model promotes intellectual collaboration, international research collaboration, and it provides data for national or global use. So I'm saying that this can be used also for Ethiopian universities. A good example is the Munessa Forest Research Station. This forest research station is, I helped build this forest station in 2007 with Erwin Beck, my research collaborator, long-time collaborator and friend. And we built this through the German Research Foundation. And it was found in the middle of Munessa Forest, an experimental station where students from Addis Ababa University, Wondogonet University, Wondogonet College, Hausa University, and even researchers from the Ethiopian Agricultural Research Organization were using. An excellent example of multi-use station that was used by many different universities. This is a model that could also be used for Ethiopia. Unfortunately, this research station was burnt down during the 2017 unrest in the area. It's a very sad thing for me personally. But going to the fourth component, the relevant curricula, maintaining cutting-edge curriculum and creating stimulating learning environment should be the target for transforming the curricula of a research university. Creating interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary programs of study and identifying subject area combinations that provide distinctive significance. For instance, combining geosciences with biological sciences could give an opportunity for unique subject area combinations. Combining business and technology, or health, nutrition, and food science, culture, language, sociology, and anthropology. So identifying subject area combinations that provide distinctive significance is one strategy in transforming curricula to be relevant and useful for a research university. And exploring inclusion of indigenous knowledge systems and a study program is one particular suggestion that I make as related to this. Now, Africa's indigenous knowledge systems. Evidence abounds that Africa has generated knowledge in philosophy, mathematics, medicine, cultural education. And oral tradition has been the main repository of African knowledge, and much wisdom has been lost to time as a result because oral tradition. But still, there are several areas of African knowledge systems that universities can benefit from studying. These include traditional medicine, traditional jurisprudence and peacemaking processes, Islamic schools, and the traditional church schools. In Ethiopia, one could one could look into different indigenous knowledge systems in different areas. For the north, one could have traditional church schools as one starting point. For Jimma area, for instance, or for Harar or Haramaya University, it could be Islamic schools, etc. So today I will discuss a bit how traditional church school could benefit if included in the curricular system. Ethiopia's traditional church education system. The traditional church education has many levels, from lower level of Nuba base to middle level and advanced level. The advanced levels are Kene and Tregwami. The lower level is to enable the student to read and write, while also to socialize. But the advanced level is such as Kene and Tregwami. These advanced levels challenge the student to shed light on the hidden, the mysterious, the inaccessible, and the extraordinary. for instance, a student of Kenya is required every day to relate texts from the Bible with everyday phenomena. So he has to do this in poetry, in poems, and it's a challenge. That's a constant challenge. So innovation and creativity is an important component of the system, which actually looks not to have these things when one looks it from outside. So Ethiopia's search education could be taken. What can universities learn from traditional education systems? Values and goals. The devotion to child scholarship and education, rigor in work and accomplishment of tasks, excellence as a continuous target, and multiplicity of interpretation, open-mindedness from the Andemta interpretation studies. In terms of methodology, one student-centered learning, peer education, and teacher facilitator and not lecturer. These are qualities that one can learn from the traditional education. The main point is that African universities also need to consider indigenous knowledge systems in their curriculum as part of the transformation. The other part that I wanted to discuss is about academic collaboration and partnerships. African universities in general and Ethiopian universities in particular have always benefited from partnerships. From the very beginning, young universities in Africa were assisted by the universities in of their colonial masters. African universities such as Makara University, University of Ibadan, University of Ghana, and University of Ibadan. All these were affiliates of University of London. The universities in the French colonies were also affiliated to the University of Paris. In Ethiopia, Alamaya was assisted by Oklahoma State University. Wondogenet had a partnership with Swedish SIDA. The Bahadar Polytechnic Institute was supported by the Russians. So partnership and collaboration has always been there from the very beginning, and universities are there to benefit from collaborations. For an emerging university, 4 points to consider related to partnerships are: number one, linking not only with European, American, and Asian universities, but also continental and regional links. That is one important thing that the universities need to take into consideration. There are excellent examples. The ARPIS, African Research Program in Insect Science, and the BioEarn and BioInnovate partnerships. These are programs that have produced several PhDs and very interesting research findings, both in insect science in the first case and in the second case, biotechnological advances. So these are important partnerships where different African countries had joined in. For ARPIS, more or less the entire continent was participated. For BioEarn and BioInnovate, the northeastern African countries were mainly there. It's not only in biotechnology, or in life sciences, or in technology that participation should be encouraged. One can also participate in social science and humanities. The Makerere Institute of Social Research is a program that brings together students from Eastern Africa, Northeastern Africa, and also Central Africa for social sciences and humanities. It's an excellent program with global and focus on the topics, but also locally focused on particular local problems. So, one thing one has to see this here is that all these three partnerships and collaborations were supported by the North, by European Union, or by SIDA, etc. And they were not supported by the universities themselves or by African governments. much progress cannot be obtained unless Africa finances its own research. Africa actually should have heeded to Thomas Odhiambo. Sir Thomas Odhiambo was the founder of the African Academy of Sciences and also the founder of ECPA, the Insect Science Research Program, a very productive and very useful program. And he had suggested that African governments should contribute to a research fund so that research in Africa could be independent of any foreign influence or etc. But his suggestion to the African Union was not supported because his own country, Kenya, did not support him in the end due to personal reasons higher up. So the point here is that Africa has to come up with programs and suggestions on how to support research within the continent also, as that's critical. Number two, having a receptive and positive attitude and quick reaction to partnerships initiatives and creating a comfortable environment for partners. This is important, and taking initiatives around potential collaborative research programs with distinctive advantages to the university. For instance, the Abai watershed or river basin and Tana could be a project with comparative advantage for Bahada University or for Gonda University or Don Marcos University. Or the coffee forest ecosystem of Jimma University, the Shaka forest, could be of particular advantage to Jimma University. Or the geology of the Rift Valley for Adama and Science and Technology and for Hausa University. I met a geologist once in Switzerland, and he told me that for a geologist to go to Ethiopia is like for a physicist to go to CERN, to this particle accelerator in Switzerland. So you can see what people have. I mean, so one has to take into advantage the comparative advantage and the most attractive project ideas that investors may have. Now, partnerships, utilizing and maximizing the use of the Ethiopian knowledge diaspora and encouraging doctoral students to tie their dissertation work with partnership links is very important. Actually, many of the links that universities in Ethiopia have had with universities in the north is through here Ethiopian Americans or Ethiopians residing in Europe. So these links have to be encouraged, and universities have to use the Ethiopian Americans who are here or Ethiopians living in the north to initiate collaborations to sustain partnerships as they have done also in the past. AFRI, the African Research Innovation Network here in the US, is doing a lot of work in terms of capacity building, in terms of linking universities with Ethiopian universities. Much work has been done. Some of them may be here also in the Zoom, and they need to continue this excellent work going on. Now, lessons from American research universities. Research universities are central to the success of any modern knowledge-based economy. America's research universities are behind the great advances of the nation. And the first research universities were initiated in the 19th century at Johns Hopkins, following the German model, which was followed by several universities, including Boston University here. And today, there are about 250 research universities in America, from University of Minnesota with 60,000 students to Rice University with circa 7,000 students. So the US government has taken successive landmark decisions to empower and support especially public research universities. The first Transformation Act was when they passed the land grant bill in 1862, which allowed the coming up of these big universities. The second was, as I said, the federal grant bills after World War II that have transformed American research investment. So also the master plan led and developed by Clark Kerr for the Californian Public Research University. This has helped the California system universities and universities in the West, and they have transformed the West as a knowledge industry. As you know, many Nobel Prize winners are found from the West Coast as a result of the huge investment in research and infrastructure in this region. Characteristics of American research universities. From my reading, I summarize that enabling governance, structure, and academic environment, high quality programs, excellent research centers and institutes, high caliber faculty and motivated and talented students, and inviting intellectual climate are the major points that one can take from American research universities. And by way of conclusion, priorities for transformative action, among others, include aligning academic and research activities with economic, social, and developmental issues of the region. Number two, investment in research infrastructure, mainly from the state, but also should be generated by faculty and leadership. Revitalizing the local and regional indigenous knowledge and innovation systems and relevant niche areas, and developing a modern and efficient information and communication system, creating a vibrant intellectual environment, leadership and faculty, and cultivating a democratic environment. African universities have to contribute to the democracy development of Africa, but they can only do this if they cultivate democratic practice within the campuses, within their faculties. Also, every nation deserves to have a few outstanding research universities. And if the research universities are to be created out of existing ones, there is a need for thorough transformation. And the transformation has to be complete and far-reaching, from governance to curriculum, from student faculty issues to research and research infrastructure, and from democratic campuses to a vibrant academic environment. So transformation has to be complete and all-encompassing. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Masresha. If you'd like to stop your screen share, and then we can, we should be able to see folks on Zoom. So we can take questions from people in the audience here in person, and also those of you who have joined us on Zoom are most welcome to submit your questions. You can either raise your hand using the reaction button on the bottom of your Zoom screen, and then we can call on you, or you can type a question into the chat. Great, thank you. So perhaps to just kick us off, Masresha, there's a question here in the chat from Zemede Asfau asking, what organizational structure do you suggest for the research wing of AA change? Any prioritization?
Once again?
Sorry. What organizational structure do you suggest for the research wing of Addis Ababa University in this transformative change that you've discussed? Is there anything that you would prioritize?
Good. Should I answer one by one, or?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I know we talked about this before. So another question as well that came in is there any collaboration among Ethiopian universities that you have identified? And then if I can ask a question too, I was just curious if you could maybe share more about, you talked a lot about partnerships with universities in the North. I'm wondering what kind of issues would you recommend that American universities consider in entering these partnerships to make sure that they are not, with the resources that they're able to bring, but they're not dominating the priorities or overriding priorities that Ethiopian institutions would want to be driving, or any African institutions would want to be driving? I think that's certainly an area of concern for any of us entering into partnerships, is to not override the priorities of our partners. So maybe we can start with those three questions.
Yeah, good. Good. Thank you, Zamadi, for the question. Addis Ababa University has an organizational structure where you have the academic wing and the research wing, run by vice presidents, and the research wing, which I also once led, has these different structures, like for director for research and for technology transfer, etc. I don't think one needs to change this organizational structure, but what one has to bring is to enable these different institutions to do the things that I have said. Otherwise, the organizational structure, even as it is, can bring quite a lot. The question that you asked about what should bring, what partners from here could bring to Ethiopian universities. You know, when projects and partnership is begun, it has to begin with an understanding of the situation and in a mutual and collaborative spirit. I mean, project ideas need to be developed together. Usually, if the counterparts from here go with a complete project and then try to bring it to their counterparts, it usually does not work well. It is when researchers are involved from the very initiation of the project, then they will also will identify what the goals are, how to come there, and then the partnership would benefit very much.
Great, thank you. I see that Bahru Zode has a question. Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you very much. First of all, greetings, Masresha. Nice to see you from a distance, and thank you very much for a very comprehensive analysis of a research university, which is a very elusive concept. I think you have given quite enough ground, quite enough material to really appreciate what a research university should be like. Just a couple of points. The first is kind of update. I think the question of autonomy. I think the government seems to be committed now to grant autonomy to the universities, to the public universities, at least to the first generation universities. It's beginning with Addis Ababa University, and there is a task force now, which has been set up and is working very hard to realize on the basis of some of the recommendations of the study that was made a couple of years ago. The second point is on the question of the facilities. It gave us a very elaborate description of the laboratories, core laboratories, national core, regional, and so on and so forth. I know how your heart is in social science and humanities as well as in the natural sciences from our long association. But I think one has to broaden it a bit to appreciate the need for the same kind of national centers, knowledge, research, in particular in terms of libraries and archives in the social science and humanities, which could be achieved only through a process of digitization. So maybe I think, I just hope you would say something also on that level, because accent was very to the natural sciences, because that also is a very important dimension of a research university. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Baharu. Yeah, I'm happy to hear that the government is working to give autonomy to major universities. That's good news, and I'm sure that will solve lots of problems. Yes, you are right. My presentation leaned more on the social, on the natural sciences, but I fully agree with you that there should be also core institutions that assist the humanities and social science research. The Institute of Ethiopian Studies is one such institute that has been core center for many studies, many studies in Ethiopian studies. So I fully agree with you that we also need to think about establishing such institutes that bring in together work in the humanities and social sciences. Thank you.
Okay, we had a question from Professor McCann and then from Professor Mulugeta.
Okay, I want to emphasize the distinguished group of in our virtual audience here. And the example of leadership is really important. These folks are leaders. And I must say that for Professor Masresha, one of his successes in life comes from having an excellent 7th grade math teacher, which was me. And to see his success in his career has been a wonderful thing. But one of the things that you and I have talked about, Masresha, is the possibility of these institutions developing their own distinguished research centers that specialize in arid environments or forested environments. And they could attract both equipment and building infrastructure. So what's the kind of infrastructure that would allow people to want to stay in Wokite, or to stay in Adama, or to stay in Jinka? Because you have to create incentives for faculty and students to want to engage there. So what are the infrastructures that should be a primary goal of the kind of efforts you're talking about?
Thank you, Jim. This is an interesting question. The major infrastructure that you need to have for such centers like forest research centers is lodging. One has to have a place for the researchers to stay and a place for researchers to have meals and also to get provisions. These are very important. In the Munesa forest station that we built, we had about 26 beds and also cooking facilities and also meeting rooms for evening classes, for discussions, etc. Such infrastructure will allow researchers to come together and discuss what they have been doing during the days, and it will help also advance their field. Like you said, the such infrastructures or the disciplines need not be one. You brought a very good example. One could establish for an arid area research somewhere in the northeast of the country. So it needs to be as diverse as the needs there are. But this is a good question.
Professor Mulugeta.
Thank you, Professor, for your excellent presentation. And thank you, Professor Baruzode, for your update. Although it is still on the problem is not still solved, but if there is positive direction, that's nice. Let me say a few points regarding the traditional schools. They were called, I think some people call them the first universities of Ethiopia. Say, for example, like Wachara and Wenji in Wacha. The late Professor Kadset Amrat has studied in church schools, and he has also written the book Church and State. So they have contributed a lot for our more modern education. When it comes to the autonomy of universities, they don't have any autonomy, to be honest. I was a witness when I was a student of Addis Ababa University 35 years ago. It is like 4 decades, I think, since I saw Professor Baruzori in Addis Ababa University. So, if you take during the period era, many professors of Addis Ababa University were fired because of their political thinking or whatever. And most universities, the leaders are electoral, selected by the party. There is no point. The party and the state are the same in Ethiopia. You cannot identify which is which. So there was no intellectual freedom. The environment was really difficult in the universities. And they were more politicized. Let alone the universities, myself being member of parliament and the chairman of the budget committee for 8 years, the parliament itself was a rubber stamp of the executive body, let alone the universities. So there are something has to be done regarding that one. And now, what we call ethnic federalism has complicated the conditions of the universities or the education system in general. There has to be done a change in the positive direction. That's what I want to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Mulugeta. You are right. Universities in the West started from monasteries, as you know. So they were theological schools, just like ours. But slowly, the universities in the West developed into universities first as programs for studies of law, and slowly they evolved into universities because they concern themselves more with also not so spiritual phenomenon. Ethiopian traditional schools never transformed themselves into universities. Why they did not is a subject that needs to be studied, but they have always been involved on spiritual issues and never involved themselves with human conditions and material things by and large. But what you say about politics and education, the separation about the politics and education, it is true. I mean, I fully agree with you. Universities never had any autonomy, and I agree with you that the 42 professors were very well known for their subject matter proficiency, were chased out of the university for their political ideas. So it's true, but we hope it will change.
Thank you. So I have a couple questions that come on Zoom, and then I'll come back to you, Professor Bard. So first we had a question from Eyualam from Abebe from when we talk about strengthening a few universities in the country to transform them to the research university level, do you foresee the danger of internal brain drain? If so, what remedial precautionary steps do you suggest institutions put in place ahead of the transformation? I don't know if you want to answer that now, or then we also have a couple questions from Telehun Yilma.
Okay, let me answer this first. This is an interesting question. Yeah, a university that aspires to become a research university has to work on its faculty. I mean, it has to train its faculty not only on subject matter, but also on research. It has to make sure that they have the language proficiency to teach, and also they have the capacity, the pedagogical training to teach. So universities have to invest on their faculty. It's true, other good faculties may want to join these universities, but see, it is competition, and their own universities must make better conditions so that they don't feed in the first place. Ethiopia has lost its best brains to America because we could not afford to contain them under the conditions we had. So the thing to do is to make sure that the right conditions exist there for them to stay.
Great, thank you. Telehun, please go ahead.
Yes, Professor Masresha, thank you for your excellent presentation. The last question you asked, you just answered, was one of my questions. A high government official in the Ministry of Education made a terse statement claiming that 80% of educated Ethiopians leave the country and move to the West, where with the loss of 80% of highly educated, probably the brightest, leaving the country, I don't know how we can have development. This is really related to a constant instability in the country, mostly orchestrated by the people who get our 80% of students. So that's my first question. How are we going to deal with losing 80% of the highly educated from a poor country like Ethiopia, moving away? How can we develop a nation under those circumstances? The second question is, you mentioned collaborations with Russia, England, and Europe, and many places. Are there any collaborations with China? China, in the 2018, The Economist in STEM, they have the highest citation index. Does Africa in general and Ethiopia in particular have any kind of collaborations with China? Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Talhawi. Yes, it is true. The best minds leave the country always. You yourself is a good example. I mean, you came here, I don't know, some 30, 40 years ago, but you also paid in return because you contributed to the development of livestock research in the country. So, I mean, unless we improve the situation in the country and unless we improve also the situation in the universities, people will always look for greener pastures and also better working conditions. But the other thing we can do is still to make sure that they are connected and they can assist one with another. So the point I'm trying to make is that universities must make their teaching environment, their environment as a whole, attractive to their staff, including their salaries. That's one thing. About research collaboration, there are many collaborations with Chinese universities in Ethiopia and with Ethiopian universities. I do not know by name which university, but I know that Addis Ababa University has a collaboration with several universities in China. I also know that the Chinese universities are collaborating with research institutes like the Biotechnology Research Institute. So Ethiopia has also to look towards China, because China, as you said, is leading and developing a lot of scientific research, and want us to benefit also from that. So I agree with you that there is more collaboration with China is needed. Thank you.
And if I can just add a real quick question that came in because it directly ties to the previous question. Are there any efforts, this is coming from Vesaha Akele, are there any efforts to lure or recruit back drained brains from the West?
I'm not so sure. I cannot say through this program or that other program, but universities try to bring in people, experts from the West. When I was a vice president, we had a program in which professors, Ethiopian professors, could come to Addis Ababa University for 1 month, give an intensive intensive lecture for 1 month, and then return. So we even had a program whereby faculty from America, Europe could combine their sabbatical leaves in such a way that they support some programs. program on institutional, the program it just slips my mind. Anyway, there are several programs which try to utilize experts that are found here. So one has to devise programs that will allow this. That's the only way one can work on this.
Thank you. Thanks so much for that.
I'm Professor Catherine Bard. I'm a professor in archaeology here at Boston University. I had a 10-year project excavating in Aksum with Dr. de Blasi and the late Professor Rodolfo Fatovich. The brain drain in Ethiopia also has to do with violence that's going on there. Now, I've been following and helping a lecturer in archaeology and cultural heritage from Aksum University who fled from Aksum to Addis Ababa, and then the next I heard from him, he was in Lisbon, Portugal, working on an MA program in archaeology. So you can't have academic programs where there is warfare and violence, first of all. That has to end somehow, and I'm heartbroken by what has happened in Aksum, where I've had so many colleagues, dear colleagues and friends. Secondly, being an archaeologist, the Center for Cultural Heritage, which has offices all over the country, I would think would be an important source for collaboration, because Ethiopia has such an incredibly rich heritage, archaeological and cultural heritage going back millions of years to early man, Australopithecines. So this would be, I think, an important avenue for collaboration in the future with academic programs.
I agree with you, Professor Catherine. I also came to know Jim and Michael through the Aksum project. I joined you, I think, the first time or the second time in Aksum, and it has been such a profitable partnership. Yes, it is very sad that that wars do not only they don't allow any partnerships, but there are no schools going on in war areas. This is a very sad situation, and one cannot do anything about it. I mean, it is politics, and there's not much I'm going to say about that, but I agree with you. It's very sad that one cannot continue such fruitful collaborations. And Ethiopia has offers a lot of opportunity for partnerships, because there are unique things, just like our archaeological heritage. I mean, there is, as I mentioned earlier, there is a new ocean being formed in the Rift Valley as the Arabian landmass, the basement rock is separating from the African basement rock, and that is a very interesting and fascinating phenomenon for geologists all over the world. So there are unique areas for searchers to come to Ethiopia to form partnerships, but we need to have the right setup and the right attitude for the partnerships to be profitable. Thank you.
Professor Waldemar.
Great. Well, thank you, Professor, for the presentation and the time that you spent here with us. So I have on that note, I have want to ask you for a personal reflection on your time as a Fulbright scholar. And is there any sort of lessons that you've learned from this experience, or things that you've picked up that have informed your assessment of what is required to build capable, functioning, high-functioning research universities in Ethiopia, or more generally across Africa? What really, I'm sort of asking, what's been sort of the upside or the benefit from your experience here? Thanks.
Thank you, Director Mikhail, for this question. Yes, it was, I had a wonderful time here. Most of my work, as you know, was reading and desktop. And the most important component that I utilized was the library service here. The library service was wonderful. I could get any book from anywhere, anytime. And also, I had time with several colleagues to discuss my what I'm working on, and I got insights. Here in Boston, there are many Fulbright scholars, and we frequently meet also during R&D programs, and we discuss what we each do, and it's fascinating. I mean, the diversity of areas Fulbrighters research on, and the experiences they all bring in. That has been very fascinating. So this is a university that makes available all resources for any researcher, and had a wonderful time. Thank you. Thank you.
We have time for another question or two. Any last questions? Oh, Elsa, please.
Hi, thank you again for this really informative presentation. It's very inspiring to see how you laid out this immense vision for a new university, and in thinking, it got me thinking about, so how does one move this vision and this plan to reality? And of course, social life being so complex, particularly in situations of war, it is so multi-directional to imagine how one could come closer to that, because of all the social actors and movements and parties involved in such a project. But what do you see as the crystallization of the kind of nodes of power, sort of the pressure points where this vision can be moved closer to reality? So what are the areas, the pressure points that can be sort of perhaps enacted on in the short term to bring the vision of a research university closer to being enacted?
If I've understood your question, I understand that the country needs to be at peace with itself to work on its education, on everything. You know, the system, the state have to be have to work on such problems. Universities can only function when there is peace. In some of the universities where there has been war for a considerable time, I mean, the universities had to be interrupted, and in order to make up for the interrupted time, semesters are shortened, and so students graduate without perhaps not necessarily completing the requirements in the best way possible. I mean, all this requires the country to be at peace, so that people can be engaged, that the investigators can be engaged in bringing their vision, in transforming their universities. All this requires a concentrated mind, and you can only concentrate when you're at peace with yourself, and people have to work on improving the situation. Thank you.
Tillerson, I see you have another question. Please go ahead.
Okay, Professor Masresha, as you know, there is really a great opportunity for countries in Africa to benefit. For example, MIT has, I've heard, all its 1,800 courses online. So the University of California is going into the same direction. Many universities are having their classes online for free, so developing countries could really benefit from that. Is there any effort, say, for example, in Addis Ababa University, to have a center to coordinate that, students could really could benefit from these advanced classes being presented by major universities around the world.
Thank you, Professor Traun. I'm not sure whether there is a center that coordinates these available resources worldwide, but the available resources are usually indicated in websites, and I have seen a couple of advertisements, a couple of notices notifying students the availability of these resources. But like you said, if you do it within a center and also program, you could also direct and help also faculty to select the most important components, course components, and direct their students to those aspects. So probably having a center to coordinate this, to maximize the utilization of these resources, may be a good idea. But the information are being provided time and again, so we are not totally unaware of them, but we could use more of them in a better way. I agree with you. Thank you.
Well, thank you all. I think we're just about out of time, so maybe we should wrap up there. I just want to add that we've had a number of chats congratulating you and thanking you for your excellent presentation in Zoom. A number of messages. I will also say, as a product of the University of California at Los Angeles, I appreciate the well representation. Masresha, thank you once again.
Thank you for coming, and thank you people in the Zoom for joining me. Thank you very much. Goodbye.